What's good, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Over Quota. As always, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already. Like always, the J. David Group, which is my company, of course, is sponsoring this podcast. My company helps high-growth software companies recruit top software sales leaders and salespeople. So go to the jdavidgroup.com/hiring to learn more about that. Or if you're looking for your next big challenge, go to the jdavidgroup.com/looking. My guest today is Liam Purcell, Talent Acquisition Manager at Odoo, which offers a suite of software products to help you better manage and run your company. We'll get to that in a second, but I want to just sort of disclose that this episode that you're listening to probably not going to be heard on a Monday. As you've been listening to this podcast, you know that all my episodes are published every Monday. This series of interviews that I'm doing is different. I'm calling it Over Quota Jobs, where I want to bring on either hiring managers or even more specifically, talent acquisition managers that have open positions at their companies who hope to come onto over quota to amplify those positions, get more applicants to apply to those positions, and hopefully you as a listener will have more opportunities through this podcast. Obviously, positions are likely geographically centric, I suppose, in some cases. In some cases, they're not. We'll find out from Liam in a minute which category he falls under. So without further ado, whichever day you happen to be listening to this, again, welcome to the Over Quota Jobs podcast. But Liam, welcome to Over Quota.
Thanks for the intro. Appreciate that, Jay.
Absolutely. So let's just start there with what I was teasing with, I guess, and then we'll just rewind. So the jobs that you'll be talking about today, open positions, are they centered around a particular geography, or can the people be anywhere for these sales positions?
So we have two main offices that we're looking at in the United States. One of them is outside of Buffalo, New York. The other is outside of San Francisco or within San Francisco. So if you're within reasonable distance within either of those two states, that kind of helps. But we're not looking for people, who are out of either New York or California at the moment.
Got it. Oh, you mean outside of? In other words, they need to be.
Yeah, they got to be within state lines at the moment.
Got it. And actually, before we go even further, is that because are there offices that they'd be going into? And again, you know probably why I'm asking that a little bit, but then also are there specific accounts that they would need to visit? Like what's more pertinent in this moment?
That's a good question. So, just through our sales cycle, a lot of it is remotely.
Mm-hmm.
So we would opt for like qualification call to an exploratory demo through like a webinar rather than doing in-person meetings. Usually the territories that we're covering in those two offices are huge. Basically, San Francisco started first. We were the office to cover both Latin America as well as North America. When we're expanding, Mexico City office to help specifically with Mexico, while San Francisco helps build out the other Southern and Central America, whereas New York is going to help build out the rest of US and Canada. So it's not going to be just local businesses that we'd be working with. But where would be an office, one in Buffalo, New York, and one in San Francisco that eventually we're going to be going back to.
Yes. Okay. Got it. That's right. So they're more strategically located than anything based on geography. Got it. Okay. That makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about Odoo. Tell us the value proposition there and some of the history and anything else that folks might find interesting.
Sure. So I think, it's really important for pretty much any salesperson out there to want to sell a product that is sellable. So we've been profitable for a few years now. So we're still privatized. We're not on, the stock exchange or anything. I don't believe we have any plans to be. The idea is that we're an open sourced ERP system. So when people think of that, especially in sales, we think of CRM. That's only one of 50 things that we do. So there's basically 50 core apps. There's several apps per vertical. So maybe some of them would be, AP, AR for accounting, month-end close for accounting, or it could be something more like in marketing or in sales or human resources, depending on which vertical you're trying to sell into. and who you're talking to on the other end of the phone. It's very much about the small and medium-sized businesses that we're going after. We're not like SAP or Oracle in the fact that they deal a lot with mainly enterprise, and they leave, the small, medium-sized businesses on the table, essentially. So our goal is to be more of like profitable, for these small, medium-sized companies, to give them the tools that these larger enterprise companies that they're going up against have. So the first app is actually free for an unlimited amount of time, unlimited amount of users. So we call that a community network. And then we have an enterprise network, which is now you're using more than one application, you're paying, et cetera, into that. When people enter that enterprise side, they're able to access 21,000 or so backend modifications to an application. So that's basically creating an open sourced app store. So some of those are free, some of those are paid for, depending on who built them, different partnerships that we have with different developers and stuff. So that's kind of the whole expansive ecosystem that we have there. That's not just one app for one use case.
How do you guys quantify SMB in terms of your target customers, whether it be revenue, perhaps maybe it's employees, potential users? How are you guys looking at that?
Yes, we look at mainly users. We say anywhere from basically 1 to 1,000 users is a great place to be. With ourselves, we're at about 1,000 people right now. So we use everything internally at the moment.
Fantastic. And you mentioned you want to be profitable. How are you funded?
That's a good question. So there is, I believe, some private funding. I'm not really too sure, to be honest, about all of how that comes in. We're really headquartered in Belgium, so I know that they're, really focused on that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But we do have a partner network, which is pretty expansive right now. I believe we're at about 2,600 partners in over 20 different countries at the moment. So the partnerships are basically other SaaS companies or business consultants or something like that. We're going to also be selling Odoo as well as what other product or service that they're selling.
Does Odoo integrate with other tech companies, or is it just okay?
Yeah, we have all the APIs and everything, with that. So the idea is that we do want to be fully integratable with everything that's out there, but eventually, down the line, we would like to be the larger network that you're using. Yeah.
Tell me about, you obviously started off talking about the folks, the position there in San Francisco area or California, and then in New York, the Buffalo area. Tell me what specifically those positions are.
Sure. So I'm gonna pull up a spreadsheet here real quick.
Sure.
So right now we're at like middle of August. So we've got some positions that we're looking at right now. We're trying to add about another 40 or so people by the end of 2020. With that, I'm looking for New York specific office. I know those are sales positions. I think there's about 2 positions left on there at the moment. So I believe there's about another like 20 or so people in New York right now. We just opened that office up in June, so I would imagine those would be continuing to expand, not just sales, but also implementation specialists, and other stuff, later down the line. Just to put into like kind of perspective, I think they have about 3,500 square feet with about 24 people or so at the moment.
Plenty of room for social distancing right now. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, plenty of room for social distancing, and then eventually more room for growth. I believe that's the plan. For San Francisco office, our direct sales team for Latin America, we're trying to build out another 11 people. We just increased headcount for that with the amount of leads that they have coming in, which is expanding right now. For direct sales in Mexico City, we've got another 3 people that we're trying to add in there. For our channel managers, which are basically, you're working with partners, you're working on training and enablement. We're looking for another 6 people to help build out our Latin America market as well. And then for our partnerships, we have another, couple positions on that team as well. So partnerships, account executives are basically walking through the same sales cycle that the direct sales people are. It's all inbound leads, qualification call, going through that exploratory webinar, showing them the product through a demo, and then, going through a presentation, going through the close. The difference I would say would be that partnerships, depending on the size of the partnership, is going to pass directly to channel account managers, whereas the other direct sales holds onto that account for 9 months. So they kind of oversee that a little.
Got it. And then beyond that 9 months, it goes where? It goes to the partner?
That would go
Customer.
to customer success if it's a direct sale.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's a small enough partner, it might be one that you just hold on to, if it's 2 or 3 people kind of thing, versus the larger, like 100 plus, partners. You don't expect to train and retain all of those people as well as recruit them.
Tell me about the specifics around the qualifications and some of the things you're looking for. Let's just start with, I guess, the direct sales people, like in terms of, years of experience, practical experience. Give me a sense of all that.
Sure. Yeah, it's all, I would say pretty junior. We're taking people right out of college with very little experience. We've hired people who do have, 10 plus years of experience as well. So it all depends. I wouldn't say that you have to have a huge sales background, but having some kind of sales knowledge, understanding of a sales cycle, or SaaS sales specifically, would help. But it doesn't necessarily need to be. We're pretty open to that. We know that sales is definitely a little bit more trainable and coachable, of a position, as long as people are willing to put in the work and dedicate some time to it. The other part of that is, empathy towards a business owner. Try to understand where they're coming from. That's where a lot of our scenario-based questions and interview style comes from. So like later down the line, when you're talking to some of the hiring managers and things, they'll want to know, like, if you were a business owner and you ran into problem X, how would you solve that? So that's the type of kind of questions that they'll ask.
And it's safe to assume then that, or let me just ask you, what does the onboarding process look like for new hires?
Sure. So there's 6 to 9 months worth of training. We're not a burn and turn by any means. We want to help people focus on learning those 50 core apps. So we're actually revising this process, especially now during COVID and everybody's been remote. So what we've done is created a 2-week onboarding session, so that it's not just like, here's 2 weeks, this is what you say for salespeople, and go on the phone and start smile and dial. It's actually more of, doesn't matter who's in your group, could be HR, could be accountants, could be, these implementation specialists, marketing team, really anybody that's been hired the same week as you and starting the same day is going to get an intro to a majority of the apps, and kind of understand through demos with some of the senior people on that team. So you'll actually be in like a training program together with everybody for 2 weeks. After that, then you're actually working with the team that you were hired for, where you're going to get to be, subdivided out of, like, say a team of 20 has 2 or 3 different other teams within that. So you'll have team leads and, a couple people that might be more senior, a couple people that may have been hired in the last couple months, but you're all learning this product together. There's a lot of change that happens, pretty rapidly. I think we're about to release version 14, I believe, in about a month, which is exciting. So there's a lot of neat little changes that happen there, as far as back-end, front-end stuff that I'm not entirely sure of yet. They're still working on deadlines to get it all in.
Are you using any particular technology to enable that to enable that onboarding, or perhaps maybe is it one of your suite of products that helps you, or is it just straight up, Microsoft Teams or a Zoom call and just jump into a demo? How has that looked?
Sure. So we're trying to write out basically like a handbook right
Mhm.
now. So the idea ultimately is that we'll have like, chapters. So like kind of like lesson plans.
Mhm.
So say, somebody's working at their own pace, they're on chapter 2 or 3, and someone else is on chapter, 5 to 7 for the rest of, the team or something.
Mhm.
Um, it kind of works like that, right? So you'll have your book, your recorded videos that the team is kind of going over together.
Mhm.
Um, and then, we've tried to be a little bit more interactive when you're doing these live stream sessions. So that way, you can just share screens and stuff like that. So it's not just, 4 hours of Zoom calls for every day for 2 weeks.
Right. Make it more synchronous.
Mhm.
Okay. And as it pertains to I forget what the account executives that are bringing on new partners, is that profile different? Less experience is okay too as well there.
I would say, yeah, less experience is okay too. With the account executive of partnerships, it's
Mhm.
pretty much a similar profile across the board.
Mhm.
There's the hunter closer mentality that kind of goes with like an account executive role versus the more relationship building and emphasis on working on relationships on the account manager side that you would see for customer success or channel account managers or partner managers. Those are kind of the two differences that we look for is like, would you rather be a hunter closer? Would you rather be more of a relationship builder? Um, so we ask those types of questions as well throughout the interview process, just so that way we kind of feel out where people want to be, so that they, don't accidentally end somewhere that they didn't if they have no sales experience whatsoever. We try to help coach them through that.
Yeah, that makes sense. What does the interview process look like? You've alluded to it, but if someone were to enter the recruitment process now with Odoo, what would the process be that you put them through?
Sure. It's pretty simple. Usually it's a phone screen with one of your recruiters, like me or someone else on the team. Then you would have a video call, usually with a hiring manager. It's usually about 45 minutes or so. That would just be like a Google Meets. And then the second one would be usually about 2 to 3 hours of, interviews, usually scenario based. Could have a couple mock calls in there if it's sales. Could have a tech test if you're doing more coding and stuff. It'd be an exam for that. Um, but that's pretty much about it. Like it's really just scenario based questions for the sales team. Um, it's not necessarily what was your quota, what did you make on attainment. Those would all be handled generally a little earlier in the phone screen. So once you're in the process, it's more of like, let's try to run through some scenarios, and we're analyzing mostly for creative, quick thinking.
Mhm.
Um, we want to see people come up with solutions, and we want to see them, see if they can figure out like, okay, we're going to walk you through a demo of this product. Can you repeat it back to us? Are you coachable? Here's an example of what a lead would look like. Let's have a mock call with somebody and try to bring them from that qualification call to a demo. Um, and then after that, try to see, hey, is there anything you think you missed? I know that it's nervous, to be in an interview. Let's talk about it. Like, what do you think you could have done better? What do you think, are a couple things you did great?
What are you looking for there when you actually ask them that? When you say, hey, how do you think you did? What do you think you could have done better? What are you technically looking for?
Sure. So, I mean, like, there's a few things on a sales call, right? Especially in the qualification that you would want to kind of understand, right? Like, what are their pain points? What is the reason that they're trying to buy XYZ? What was the solution that they're really trying to solve with this, rather than taking like, hey, I need a CRM. Cool, awesome, we have one. Let me pull it off the shelf. And dive a little bit deeper with them. That's ultimately, I think, what we're really looking for.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Um, Broader picture question before we get into some of the tips and advice you might have for candidates, which is
Mhm.
if someone's listening to this, it's funny, right? I'm just sitting here having a conversation with you now. We've got, you and I had just alluded to the fact that we're still in the middle of a pandemic before we hit record. And here you are, and you know look at the jobs numbers, and it seems to me like it's all doom and gloom for the most part. But here you guys are, in hiring mode, and I'm hearing this from hiring managers seemingly more often than not lately. But how has COVID-19, the pandemic, and all this stuff affected you guys in one way or another?
That's a good question. Well, the product itself is pretty diversified, right?
Mm.
One of our main offerings that we also have and have seen an uptick in has been, I need a website and I need to take a payment through the website.
Mm.
So that's probably been one of the major services that we've seen. The other side of it is, hey, I'm paying for 20 different, applications across multiple different users, and I'm paying X. How do I reduce that spend? By consolidating that into one platform. So that's been kind of the other side of it as well. When they start looking at, spending versus savings. So that I would say those are probably two of the direct sales side of things. With partnerships, there's companies, especially the small, medium-sized manufacturing companies, which are trying to offer, say, a specific product or a specific solution into these types of areas where those people are going, well, I don't really know if I need this. This might seem, kind of excessive right now. Let's hold off and wait on it. So that's other companies are trying to diversify their portfolio as well. So they'll reach out to us and say, hey, can we also partner with you and try to sell your product on top of this? So our partnerships team, their quotas for their monthly recurring revenue skyrocketed the last 3 months. They're all 140 to 150%.
Wow. Okay, that's good to hear for sure, and I can see that. It's interesting. So people on one side, to what you said before, if I have a business and I'm unable to take payment, then obviously that hurts my business. So I'm unable to make payment, especially in these days where I really need to give people an option aside from just sending in a check to me, right? If I can take payment online, I'm going to get the money much faster. Yeah, that makes sense. And then on the other end, of course, it's, if you're paying, say $5,000 for all these disparate business applications, and who knows, some of them you don't even use or whatever, right? Or people aren't utilizing them, and then they come to Odoo, and now all of a sudden they can spend, half that or something like that and get it all under one umbrella and have much more control over it. And of course, the partners are looking at that saying, this is something that we want to offer our customers as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, cool. That's fantastic. All right. So getting back to the interview process for a second, talk to me about what tips and advice or suggestions you have for candidates that are going through your interview process, or just in general. Give me 3 good ones. and of course, I know they'll all be good. So
Yeah, I'm just trying to see here. If I had a tip for people, one of my favorite tips that I learned for anyone in an interview is try to call it funneling your answers, right? So how you said, hey, what are 3 things, right? I would say here's 1, 2, and 3, and then you would dig a little deeper and say, okay, well, here's 1 and 2, and then you dig a little deeper. Now it's just one-on-one. It turns into a conversation. Yep, so I like that just as a general interview tip. With ourselves specifically, they have a lot of emphasis in transparency and leadership. So they're looking for people who show humility and have transparency, show they can be coachable, that aren't going to come in and say, oh, I've done this before, I know exactly what I'm doing, but more of, okay, what do I have to learn from this? There's a lot to go that goes into learning 50 apps and having industry kind of agnostic views of things, where it's not one spiral into one industry, into one problem that they're trying to solve. There's so many things that we learn from our customers as well, which kind of goes back into being that creative problem solver. And I would say another part of this is just because we're a relatively small organization, they're going to want to see the willingness to learn and help others, especially as we're expanding quite rapidly. Right now, about 31% of our Odoo Incorporated, which is basically the US and Mexico, 31% of those employees are new hires right now.
Wow. Yeah, that definitely puts a lot of strain on onboarding and coaching if you have a bunch of people that aren't willing to learn. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
That'll make it really hard. Okay. So just to recap, funnel your answers, right? Be very specific, and then be able to be prepared to drill down, get to drill down, so to speak, and expound, I guess, on what you're answering. So they're very specific and focused. Have some humility. Of course, you got to be open to essentially acknowledging the fact that you're not going to know everything, if you will, and obviously be willing to learn. What we were just alluding to, what we were just saying.
Mhm.
Okay, that's great. And one last question I'll ask is, how should folks go about applying for these open opportunities?
Sure. So all of our positions are going to be updated on odoo.com/jobs. On there, you'll be able to see different countries that we're hiring for, different offices as well. So even if somebody's listening to this and they're, say in Mexico City, they want to see what's going on in Mexico City, or they're, on the East Coast, they can funnel that down to US, New York, or if they're on the West Coast, US, San Francisco. If they're in Europe, they can see, all the Belgian ones. Or China, I think we're opening a new office in China coming soon, somewhere in the mainland, as well as Hong Kong, that we have open right now. And then there's another office also in India, I believe on like the southern part of India. So the idea is that we're pretty global. We keep everything up to date and like localized on the website. So just odoo.com/jobs.
odoo.com/jobs. Actually, one other question too that I can't believe I didn't ask at the top of this. How many employees does Odoo have now?
So yeah, in the entire world, I think we just went over 1,000 recently. To put an example of where we were when I first started in the last week of February, we were at about 850.
Wow. Okay.
So that's about the level that they're growing. For the United States, for the San Francisco office, Buffalo and Mexico City, we're at about 225 right now. There's about a dozen people down in Mexico, about another 24, I believe, over in New York, which are all brand new since I started as well. I was about, I think, employee number like 170 something. We're at now like 225. So we've hired a good amount of people just since the pandemic there, and then about 85 people this year so far.
That is fantastic. That is such refreshing and good news for people to hear if they're just learning of this podcast for the first time, or if they've been listening for a while. That's really good. As a matter of fact, you actually did mention the 1,000 employees when you were talking about the your own customer base, and how Odoo actually uses your applications just like your customers do as well in that context. So sorry for making you be redundant there, but just at least I can highlight it again in terms of the number of employees that people have, in case somebody else missed it as well and was slightly off their game today. Liam, thank you very much. I appreciate you doing this, and appreciate you going over quota.
Of course, Jay. I appreciate being on the show. Thank you.
Absolutely. Goodbye, everybody. Don't forget, of course, to rate, review, and subscribe. Goodbye.
Bye.